Welcome back. This is Dan Havey with CF Ninja Hacks, and today we are going to answer Sylvia's question where she was wondering if something similar to this could be built into ClickFunnels. And you can see down here what it is. This is an individual product, and it's showing all the different parts that come with this product. It's a backup steering camera of some sort. And so as you click on each one of these images, of course, you see the larger display of it up top here. And so that's what we're going to build out. And you also see here that the little image goes grayscale and it also fades out as well. So I'm going to build that for her today. In fact, I already have it built. So let's take a look at what I have here so far. What we have is the big image up at the top. We have the smaller images down at the bottom. And in this case here, this image that has already been clicked on because that's the way the page is going to load. And it's already been clicked on, so it is grayscale, and it also has faded out some. Now, as we click on the next image, same thing happens. The little image will go grayscale and fade out some, and the other image will come back to its normal. And of course, you can click on these in any order and move around the screen. And you can see here, especially when you go back and forth between these two, you can clearly see the difference that the small image has. So we could also do this as a hover, where you just hover over the image and it would change out up here, similar to what you would have if you were on Amazon, and you can hover over the images, and I guess you can also click on them as well and hover over them, and the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in now and we're going to build this out. The most difficult part is actually the setup on this. And so let's get to work on that first. So I have a section down here, nothing special at all about this section, except that it's full page width. And otherwise, I really don't have a little padding on it, no big deal. Okay, and then we have a row inside of it, and we have two rows inside of this section. And I gave the first row the data title of large image row, so LG image row. And again, whenever we're putting in data titles, we always want to start the first word with a small letter, a lowercase letter, and then the subsequent words we always want to have an uppercase letter, that's known as camel casing. And always remember to click on update. And then on the bottom down here, we'll just scroll down a little ways so we find it. We have another row down here, and I gave it the data title of SM image row. So we got large image row and small image row, and that's because on the top we have large images and on the bottom we have our small images. So let's go back up to the top. And up here at the top, we want to start off by dropping in an image element. So just open up your image element. You all know how to do that. Pull it in, drop it into its place. And here we don't need any margins between the images, even though you could put in, if you were doing some sort of a design and you wanted to have more room around it or something, you could put in a top margin if you wanted to. And then, of course, you go into your image library and you find the image you want to use. And of course, in our case here, this first image, of course, has to match up with the first image down here at the bottom. And I'll show you how I got that all set up. But again, so when you click on this image appears. So you want to make sure you pair them up properly. So this here, then we'll open this up again. In this case here, I didn't want it full width. I just said I want it to be 95% width. And what that means is going to be 95% of the width of its bounding element. So the column that it is sitting inside of is however many pixels. This is going to be 95% of that many pixels. And yes, you can put in percentages and it works just fine. Because here, if we take this down, let's just make this just make it 5%. Now you see it's just itty bitty tiny there. And now we come back to 95%. And again, you don't want to set a height, only set a width is what you normally want to do. And in this case here, you could put in a link URL. Think about a case where you might have a bunch of different products on the page. Each one of these is a different product. In this case here, these could all be training programs. You click on this one here, and then you say, oh, okay, I want to buy Tony's program. You click on the image of Tony, and it takes you off to a sales page somewhere. So you could put that in right there. And if you're going to do that, I suggest you open it up in a new tab. Now, we can also put in some themes, and you can see a little bit of a shadow down here at the bottom. So I think I used, was it this one here? I think this is the one I used. It'd be nice if they were highlighted to tell you which one you had picked, but it's not. So I'm pretty sure it's that one there with just a little bit of a shadow at the bottom, and so we get that effect right there. And on these later, we'll see we just have a line around the outside. I kind of picked a border for those. And now let's open this back up. And now we can go to advanced, and we really set nothing in here at all. So again, you set your data title, BG or big image 1. I guess I had not pointed that out yet. So we want to go in here and set it as big image 1, and it has to be big image -1. And the dash is going to come in very important in a few minutes. And then of course this one would be number 1. And then what you're going to do is once you get this all set up the way you want it, you of course hit your clone button here, you clone the image, you come into the second one, and in this case here what we want to do is we want to change this 1 to a 2. And then 3, 4, 5, right on down the way. Make sure you click on update. But what you're also going to see here is I have a little asterisk in the beginning. And I put that in there always to remind myself that as I'm building this out, that on page load, I want to hide everything that has an asterisk in front of it. So in this case here, I think we looked at everything we needed to with these images. So let's come in and come to manage. And what we're going to do is just come in here, click, click, click on all the little eyeballs and hide all of them except for the very first image, because again, on page load, we just want this image, the singular image at the top up here. So we got our singular image there. Now we come down to our small images at the bottom, and we're not going to size them down in the editor. We're going to size them down the little line of CSS. So on this first one, we're going to come in here, the same thing. Now here we want a top margin of 20, and the only reason is so that we get some line, some separation here as this wraps down to the second line with all of our images. Because you see here, what we did is we're stacking all these images on top of each other, just like we did the first time. Then we're going to use a little line of code that's going to say that we want to, what is known as flex, we want to flex them and then wrap them down to the second line like you see here. So we take those big images all stacked on top of each other, we shrink them down, and using flex, we line them up side by side. And then we also wrap them down to the next row if we have more than will fit on the top row. So what we want to do here is open this up. Again, go out, find the image that matches the one from above. And then we're not going to set a width or a height, and you would not set any links or anything either. We're going to pick a template for it. You don't have to pick a template for any of these, but I thought it would be nice to use it. And so I think that was this one here that I picked. And then in this case, what I did is I changed the opacity and the grayscale. So let's turn this back on to the way it would normally be. So we have full color and fully visible, but then we can go to a light fade, a strong fade, or a even stronger fade. And I decided on that middle one, and then we're also going to go black and white. So now you're going to clone this. Once you get it all set up, you're going to clone this, but then you're going to get to the second one, and you got to make sure you go in and turn these back to full visible and full color so that all the rest of them going forward are all colorized. And in this case here, we're not going to hide them, so we're not going to put a little asterisk in front of it, but we are going to give it the data title of, in our first one here, of course, small image -1. Again, dash being very important. So small image -1, update it. And then this one here, of course, is small image -2, right on down the way here for all of them. So that is it for the setup. Now let's go in and take a look at our code. And so that's how it should look. You should just have the one image up here on top. Let me close this. You should have the one image up on top, and then you should have all the rest of the images down here stacked on top of each other. And like I said, we will use some code here in a moment to flip them side by each. So what I want to do is just small this up a little bit. Small this up. Where did I learn how to speak English? So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn on this first little section of CSS. And what we're going to say here is that we want to find the data title of small image row. So that, of course, would be down here at the bottom. We gave this the data title of small image row. And then what we want to do is we want to go inside of that element, and we want to find the class of col-inner. And let me show you why that is. We'll come over here to the live page, and that row that we have right here is small image row right there. Now, what we want to do is whenever you use Flexbox, and that's why we're doing this, because we want to use our display flex, which is also known as Flexbox. What we want to do is find the element that is the bounding element of all of these images. So whenever you do this, so let's just, again, our example here is we're using a bunch of images. They're all inside of one column, and we want to find the element that is the first element outside of all these images. So here we got our image 1, image 2, image 3. As we go along, you can see them being highlighted over here. So we got all of our images. Well, the first element outside of it, the image's bounding element, is right here, this class of col-inner. Right here is a class of col-inner, and in order to be able to call it, we can't just say, well, okay, call the class of col-inner, because every single one of these columns on the page will have that same class. So we have to define it by saying, okay, we want to find this row up here that has the data title of small image row, and then we want to traverse down the DOM tree until we find this class of col-inner, which is right here, because again, that is the bounding element for all of the images. So that's why we use this as our selector right there. It's a combination of a data attribute or an attribute. You can call them either one, and then combined with a class. So here we're going to say we want to do display flex, which then again, what it will do is it will take all those images that were stacked on top of each other, and it will put them side by side. So they'll go across this way. Well, you're going to see right now, if I click out of here, they didn't move. Nothing happened yet, and I'll show you why in a second. But then we also know that we want them to not only go across, we want to say, okay, if there's too many to go across, we want them to go down to a second line or a third line or whatever. And then in this case here, justify content, we want to center them. There's a bunch of different ways that you can justify the content, but in our case here, we wanted to keep them centered, keep them nice and lined up and square, and so that's why we have it here. If I were to put in one more, these would actually come over and just split the difference because there'd be 4, but it would stay in the center and justify itself, because the next line is what makes the difference here. Is we're going to say now data title contains small image. So again, all of these images were small image dash 1, 2, 3. So what we say here with the asterisk and the equal sign, we're saying we want to go out and find all of those small images by saying any data title that contains the text, contains the string of small image, exactly like that, with the uppercase I, because it is case sensitive. We want to find all of them, and what we want to do is we want to make their width only 20% of the page. So again, it's going to be 20% of its bounding element, and we already know that this right here is its bounding element. So it's going to be 20% of the width of that column, and then we want to put some padding on it. And padding shortcut like this says 0, so that means 0 on the top and the bottom, and then 10 pixels on either side. So we could have written this padding 0, 10 pixels, 0, 10 pixels, but in this case here we can use the shortcut and we can say padding of 0 on the top and the bottom and 10 pixels on either side. So what we can do now is back that out, and boom, everything goes into place. Because we have our flex that says put everything side by each. We have our wrap that says go down to the next line. We have our justify content that says center everything. And then we only want each element to be 20% in width. And we have the padding just so there's a little space in between here. And again, we have the margin of 20 on the top, which gives us our space top to bottom. So that is it for the CSS. So let me turn this off. So now we got everything looking like we want on the page. Now we have to build in the action because we need to use some JavaScript, or in our case, we're technically going to use the jQuery framework in order to just write a couple lines of code that says that when we click on one of these images at the bottom, we need to show the image at the top. So we will go in here, we will go into our tracking code. And again, we're going to start off here. We're going to say the data title that contains, again, asterisk equals contains small image. If somebody clicks on that, so that again would be any one of these images down here because there's small image 1, small image 2. So anytime that any of those small images are clicked on, we want to run this function here below it. And this is, of course, the function below it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to deal with the grayscale and the fading. So in this case here right now, this one is grayscaled and faded. And if you watch over here, you're going to see this flash and turn colors. And when I click on it, or when I click on a different image, you're going to see that it says image gray 1, image opacity 5. That is going to disappear. So let me click on Garrett White here. It disappeared. I click back. It comes back again, and it goes away, and it comes back. So that's what the first two lines of code do, is what we're going to say is when we click on any image down here, in fact, if we click on there, no, it didn't do it, shouldn't have. Okay, so we click on any one of these images, what it's going to do is it's going to remove the class of image gray 1 and image opacity 5 from the element that is currently on. But what we're really saying is take it off of all of the elements. So that's what we're saying here again. We're back to our data title contains small image, and then we have this caret and image, because the data title of small image is actually this element right here. And what we want is the image element inside of it. So that's why we put in the caret and the img, is to indicate that we want this particular element right there. And then we simply say remove class of image gray 1 and image opacity 5. So it just takes those out like we've seen before. Just takes them out and puts them back in when you click on it. So then what this says is this refers to whatever you clicked on in order to cause this function to run. So we got a click function, so no matter what you click on, then that will be our this. And so then we're going to say this and then children. So let's show you what that means. So let's just keep with our first image here. So we have this, and now when we click on this image and bring this back up, we're going to say, okay, again, we click on the small image part up here. We click on this element, and then we want to find the image element. So in this case here, the image element would be the children element of what we had just clicked on. Now, I could have possibly gone in here and I could have said, instead of just, we could say this, and then I could have said find image, or find the first image, or something like that. And it would have done the same thing, but as a children element, it only goes down, or a children method technically was known as, it only goes down one level. So it'll go from the element that you clicked on to the very first child element right underneath it, and it will grab a hold of that one. And then what we're going to say then is just to that element right there, that image element, now we want to add back in these classes. So up here we remove the class from all of the small images. On the second line, we add those classes back in to the small image that was clicked on. So that's again what we have here, where it goes back and forth. Is so when we click on a different image, that image, let's just open this up here. So now this image gets the image gray opacity, image opacity 5, and when we click back here, you see it goes away down on the bottom one, and it goes back into the top one, and we can just keep clicking back and forth all day. So now we got that changing out, so we got the color changing at the bottom. Now we got to change out the image at the top. So again, what we're going to say here is we're going to set up a variable because we need to capture the number off of the image that we clicked on. So we click on this here, and this is, of course, it is small image 2. So we need the number 2 because then we need to say, okay, go up to the large images and give us the large image number 2. So that's what we're going to do here. So we're going to store that in a variable. And again, we have this, meaning what we had just clicked on. Let me cancel that. So this refers to the small image we clicked on. And we're going to go into the data title. Again, our data title, in this case here, small image 2 is our data title because that's what we set it as. And we are going to split that data title at that dash. So that's why it's so important to make sure we put that dash in there, because we need to have something to grab a hold of to be able to split this so that we can grab the number off of the end of it. So we're going to split that element. And when you do that in jQuery, which is the language we're using here, it's a JavaScript framework. When you do that inside of jQuery and it splits it, it's going to split it into 2 parts, of course. You're going to have small image is the first part, and 1 or 2 in our case here, we're looking at small image 2. So small image will be the first part, and the number 2 will be the second part. Now this is known as an array now, and jQuery uses zero-based indexing. So the small image part of this array will have an index of 0. The number 2 part of this array will have an index of 1. So therefore, we are looking at grabbing a hold of the index of 1. It's notated just like that. So now our variable of number has the number 2 inside of it, and we can go along our merry way. So the next thing here, what we're going to do is we're going to take all of the elements that contain the data title of big image. So big image 1, big image 2, big image 3, they're all going to contain that string in their data title, and we want to hide them. So like before, we changed the opacity and the grayscale of all the small images, and then the one we clicked on, we added that class to it. Well, in this case here, we're going to take all of the big images up at the top, and we're going to hide every single one of them, just obviously for a split second. And then what we're going to do is put in the one that we had clicked on. So again, in this case here, we clicked on image, small image 2, and we want large image 2 to appear at the top. So our big image 2. So we're saying here now data title contains, I could make that an equal to, big image dash, and what we want to do then is put in that number. So all this right there, that puts in that number 2. So it's data title equals big image dash 2, and we want to show that one. So here we hid all of the images. Now we're going to show image number 2. And that is it. So I hope that with seeing it on the screen and me going through some pretty intensive detail on how that works, it gives you a better idea of how you can simply do something like this. Now, the question you might have for yourself is, well, how did I know what these classes were here? It was very simple. I came in here, I set that first image when we were building this thing. Remember, I set that first image to the grayscale, the black and white, and I set it to a strong fade. And then I saved the page and I previewed the page, and I came in here and I said, okay, well, here's the element. Let's inspect that element. So we'll click here, we'll come down, we'll inspect the element. And what were the classes that ClickFunnels automatically inside of itself put in there? I didn't come up with any of this. All I did was took the existing stuff that ClickFunnels was already doing, and I applied it back to itself. So all I saw here is like, oh, okay, when I changed that, it added this class of image gray 1 and image opacity 5. And so I just grabbed that and said, okay, well, let's just turn this on and off, which is basically all I'm doing. So we're just going to turn that on and off. And so when you really look at what all of this does, if you look at all of the code here, is this part up here turns the color and the opacity on and off. It turns it on and off. This part down here at the bottom, all this does is it hides and shows the top element based upon which one of the small elements you clicked on. That's all it does. And that's what I like doing with ClickFunnels here, is using the native elements whenever possible and just manipulating them without having to write too much code. Because, I mean, what do we have here? 6 total lines of code, basically. And so, either way, that is it for today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Have a great day.